I grew up believing that my family was ideal: substantial home in a posh area, meals beneath glistening chandeliers, parents who always had the appearance of people straight out of magazines. But if I've discovered anything over the years, it's that the most serious flaws can be concealed by a flawless appearance. Because my perfect family was actually a masterfully constructed delusion. I'm Lena Parker, and I grew up in a society where money appeared to go on forever. As a smart businessman, my father, James Parker, started his company from the ground up and expanded it into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Despite never having a job, my mother, Elizabeth Parker, was the epitome of style. She was able to spend money more quickly than anyone I had ever known. My father put in more work than anyone else I know. He made sure our family had everything they needed. If it had a price tag, we had it. A mansion with a heated pool, expensive cars in the garage, designer clothing, and tuition for private schools. But I didn't care about any of that, because my parents' attention was the one thing I truly desired and that money couldn't purchase. And that? I could never have that one item. I was never truly parented by my mother. Her priorities were different: shopping excursions, spa treatments, and elegant country club luncheons. My mother and father were both always at work. She had a lot of important social events on her itinerary. As a result, I grew up surrounded by nannies and housekeepers. My mother constantly found an excuse to dismiss them, and the most of them never stayed more than a few months. Helen, however, was unique. When I was 8 years old, Helen started working for us. She didn't perform her duties in a robotic manner like the others did. She truly had concern for me. On calm Sunday afternoons, she taught me how to bake cookies, told me stories before bed, and even helped me with my homework. I can recall Helen showing me how to properly shape each cookie while I sat at the kitchen counter with my hands drenched in flour. "Like this, sweetheart?" she remarked while gently squeezing the dough. "Just a little pressure, there you go." I felt safe for the first time in my life, as if I were truly important to someone. But in my home, happiness never lasted long. I heard my mother yelling in the living room one afternoon while I was reading on the stairway. "I saw you wearing my silk scarf." My stomach grew constricted. My mother was standing over Helen, her eyes flaming with rage. As I approached the doorway, Helen answered, "Miss S. Parker," in a firm voice. "I never touched it." "Maybe someone misplaced it." "I don't care," my mom said abruptly. "I can't have a thief in my house. You need to leave. Now." I went cold. I opened my mouth to say, "Mom," but Helen turned to me and smiled sadly. "It's okay, sweetheart," Helen said without a word. Helen packed her luggage and left through the front door while I looked on helplessly. She refrained from crying. She didn't plead. She simply walked out. And I was devastated as I stood there. I became aware of how disposable individuals were in my mother's world at that point. You were cast aside if you were unable to fulfill her needs. But my father was different. At least he supported us, even though he was constantly working. He started his business from nothing, put in long hours, and took care of everything that allowed us to live well. "If you want something in life, you build it yourself," he used to remark. In my opinion, he was an unbreakable man. However, I was mistaken. I had just turned 14 when it occurred on a chilly winter's evening. The phone rang while I was upstairs, having trouble with my arithmetic assignment. I heard my mother scream a second later. "James!" She was standing in the living room with her phone falling out of her grasp when I hurried downstairs. "Your father had a heart attack at his office," she exclaimed. After that, I don't recall much. The drive to the hospital is something I recall. My mom is screaming for the doctors to take action. I recall the doctor shaking his head and saying, "I'm sorry," in the chilly, sterile waiting area. My dad had left. At his desk, he fell. A severe heart attack. There was no time to respond. He simply vanished. At the funeral, my mother gave an Oscar-worthy performance. Her makeup was perfect. She was wearing a pricey black dress, and her tears came at the perfect times. Guests praised her for her strength and whispered their condolences. However, I saw right through it. She wasn't lamenting her husband's passing. She was terrified of losing the man who provided the money for her way of life. The late-night phone calls reached me. "What do you mean I can't access the estate yet?" "Why not?" "I'm his wife." In her room, my mother wasn't crying because she was sad. She was crying over bank accounts that she was still unable to access. I knew then and there that things would alter in our life. And I was correct. My mother took a seat at my father's desk, the large leather chair that had always belonged to him, a month after the funeral. As she ran her hands over the gleaming wood, she gave a small smile. She declared, "I'll be running the company from now on." I felt sick to my stomach. "Mom," I murmured slowly, "you don't know anything about business." "I don't need to," she said sarcastically. I trust my instincts. She had a disastrous first board meeting. Because the CFO was excessively pessimistic, she fired him. The head of operations then arrived. The most seasoned employees quit the organization one by one. Under her well-groomed hands, my father's empire, which he had dedicated his life to creating, was collapsing. I made an effort to alert her. "Mom, you need help." "I know what I'm doing, Lena," she chuckled. She had no knowledge. Within a year, the business was shut down. My mother took out loans, mortgaged everything, and burnt through the savings. Then the house? Lost. After packing, we relocated to a small suburban apartment. My mom's answer? "We'll just use your college fund to start over." At that point, I came to the following realization. I was unable to save her. However, I could save myself. I anticipated it. I knew my mother would ruin everything after my father passed away. She didn't know how to manage finances or accountability. I still hoped she would figure it out, though, or at least pay attention to those who were more experienced. Naturally, that was foolish, since my mom didn't want guidance. She desired authority, and when she got it, she blazed through it like a wildfire burning parched grass. Little things were involved at first. She began making adjustments at the company, such as switching suppliers, laying off employees, and approving massive marketing campaigns without any plan. My mother didn't care that the board pushed back. Over dinner one evening, she casually said, "They're too old-fashioned. They don't understand how business works today." "Mom, you don't understand how business works today," I replied. She tightened her smile. "Oh, Lena, don't be so negative." Then the big one arrived. One of my mother's country club acquaintances was starting a business, and she spent about $1 million in it. "It's the future," she declared condescendingly. "Luxury smart homes. It's going to make us a fortune." Within 6 months, it crashed. The business failed. The funds had vanished. "It's just a small setback," she remarked, chuckling uneasily. "We'll recover." We didn't. Her spending patterns remained unchanged. As if nothing had happened, she continued to shop, throw lavish dinner parties, and purchase luxury clothing. My mother mortgaged the house when the debts began to mount. After that, she sold the stocks in my father's portfolio. Next, the vehicles. Then the Aspen vacation home. "It's just temporary," she repeated. "We'll bounce back." As a spoiler, we didn't recover. From the sidelines, I observed everything that happened. When it all began to fall apart, I was 16 years old, and I knew better than to get involved. I discovered the hard way that my mother was not a good taker of criticism. However, I lost the ability to hold my tongue one evening. My mother was seated in the living room, going through a large pile of documents. When I got home from school, I said, "What's that?" "Nothing," she answered hastily. Before she could stop me, I snatched the papers from the table. "Mom, these are foreclosure notices." She flushed. "It's nothing serious, just a misunderstanding with the bank." I looked at her and asked, Misunderstanding? The house is in foreclosure?" My mom sprang up and grabbed the papers out of my grasp. "Don't overreact, Lena. We're losing the house?" She let out a sigh. "It's just a bump in the road." I felt like screaming. I shouted, "How did this happen? What about the savings? The investments? The company?" My mom's expression grew stern. "Your father left us in a terrible position," she replied. I sharpened my voice and said, "Excuse me? Dad built that company from nothing. And then he died and left me with a mess." I gazed at her. "You're blaming Dad?" She let out a sigh. "I'm not blaming anyone. But Lena, the truth is, things aren't looking good. No kidding." My mom's eyes squinted. "I need your help." My heart began to race. "What kind of help?" She sat down and smoothed her immaculately pressed gown. She said, "Your college fund," in a quiet voice. "It's just sitting there." I felt sick to my stomach. No. Lena, I stepped back and said, no, that's not happening. We need it, she stated, her tone becoming more authoritative. I need it, I retorted sharply. My mom's eyes glowed. Don't be selfish, Lena. This is about family. Family? I said with a sour laugh. You mean the family that never showed up for me unless they needed something? She thinned her mouth. You wouldn't even have that money if it weren't for your father. Exactly, I said in a chilly tone. And I'm not going to waste it trying to fix your mistakes. Her gaze grew gloomy. Lena, I'm your mother. Yeah, I replied. And look how that turned out. Within 2 months, the house was gone. On the opposite side of town, we took a small apartment. The sort of place where the neighbors argued at 3 in the morning, and the walls were flimsy. It was difficult for my mom. She hardly left her bed for the first 2 weeks. The refrigerator was usually empty, and the drapes were closed. After school, I accepted a job at a nearby coffee shop. The bills needed to be paid by someone. Attempting to open a bottle of wine at noon was my mother's definition of helping. One day when I got home from work, she said, "You're going to college anyway." My purse fell to the ground. "Not if you drain my college fund." She squinted. "I'm trying to keep this family together." "No," I answered icily. "You're trying to save yourself." "Lena, you've already taken everything from me," I yelled. "You're not getting my future, too." Something unsightly distorted my mother's face. She growled, "You think you're so much better than me?" "No," I replied. "But I'm smarter." She winced. I also didn't feel bad about it. No more. I had saved up enough cash by the time I graduated from high school to partially pay for my first year of college. To make up the difference, I looked for scholarships and took out loans. My mother then reached her lowest point right before I left for school. She was seated at the kitchen table with a pile of empty wine bottles in front of her when I got home one evening. I put my keys down and said, "Mom?" Her eyes had gone glassy. She had smudged makeup. "Lena," her voice trailed. I moved in her direction. "Are you okay? We need to talk." "About what?" She retrieved a crumpled piece of paper from her handbag and slid it over the table with trembling hands. The bill was from a credit card, charges totaling more than $20,000. "Mom?" she uttered. I need you to co-sign a loan," in a voice that was quite low. I went cold. "You're joking." With desperation, she stated, "It'll just be for a few months. Just to get us back on track." I gazed at her. "No. Lena, please." My hands balled into fists, and I said, "No. I'm not saving you from this." Her mouth quivered. "But I'm your mother." "Yeah," I replied icily. "And that used to mean something." I turned around and left. She made no attempt to stop me. I departed for college 2 weeks later. My mother did not attend my farewell. I didn't think she would. I knew what was going to happen. She would exhaust all of her credit, deplete her bank accounts, and ultimately reach her lowest point. And now? I had no intention of being present to apprehend her, because I had at last mastered the most difficult lesson of all. Walking away is often the only way to live. My getaway was college. I was able to breathe for the first time in my life. No more opulent homes, no more pretending to smile at charity functions, no more being cautious and speculating about when my mother would lose her mind. Only me, a subpar dorm room, and a future I was at last creating for myself were involved. I had 2 jobs. I tutored high school students in math and worked at the campus coffee shop. It kept me afloat, but it wasn't glamorous. The majority of my tuition was paid for by my scholarship. The remainder I made up with loans and sheer willpower. Sometimes my mom would call. I didn't respond. I don't believe I hated her, therefore it wasn't that way. I had just finished. Stop trying to mend things. She's finished bearing the consequences of her poor choices. Naturally, though, my mother wasn't the kind to keep quiet for very long. The first indication of problems appeared during my freshman year's spring semester. My phone chimed as I was dragging myself back to my room after finishing a difficult midterm. My mom texted me, "We must speak." "It's crucial." I put my phone back in my pocket after staring at it for a whole minute. Not at all. However, she appeared 2 days later. She was standing on the sidewalk as I went outside after finishing my shift at the coffee shop. She had a terrible appearance, pale and thin and anxious in a way that made my stomach knot. She yelled, Lena! In an overly bright voice. With a groan, I approached her. Mom, what are you doing here? She gave a feeble smile. I was in the neighborhood. I crossed my arms and asked, Really? 3 hours away from home? She laughed lightly. Well, I wanted to see how you were doing. I'm fine. I deliberately avoided asking her to sit down. Her smile faltered. Listen, I've hit a bit of a rough patch. It was there. Despite knowing the answer, I inquired, What happened? She let out a loud sigh. It's the economy. You know how hard things are right now. Uh-huh. And the apartment, she said, her voice faltering. What about it? Well, I'm behind on the rent. I clenched my jaw. How behind? She grimaced. 3 months. I counted to 5 while closing my eyes. I said, And whose fault is that? Lena, you lost the house. You lost the company. And now you're about to lose the apartment. What exactly do you want me to do about it? Her face grew stern. You're my daughter. And you have money. I chuckled. You mean the college fund you tried to drain? The one I fought to keep? That money? Her gaze became piercing. Lena, you wouldn't even be in college if it weren't for your father's money. Exactly. My father's money, not yours. Something unsightly twisted in her mouth. Don't be selfish, she yelled. I raised you. No, I quietly said. Helen raised me. Her jaw dropped. You're on your own, Mom, I murmured, turning to face the door to the dorm. Figure it out. Lena! I continued to walk. I also didn't turn around. It ought to have ended there. However, my mom, she was not one to be defeated easily. My bank called me a couple weeks later. Miss Parker, we noticed some suspicious activity on your account. I felt sick to my stomach. What kind of activity? A withdrawal request for $5,000. What? It was flagged because the signature didn't match yours. Who tried to withdraw it? It was an online request under your mother's name. My hand gripped the phone more tightly. Decline it. And lock the account. Understood, ma'am. After hanging up, I called my mom right away. The second ring caught her attention. Lena! Her tone was too phony and too bright. I growled. What the hell did you do? She said. I just needed a little help, with ease. A little help? I trembled. You tried to steal from me. It's not stealing. It's family. No, I yelled. It's fraud. Her tone became piercing. Lena, you have so much. I just need a little bit to get back on my feet. That's not my problem. You wouldn't even have that money without me and your father. Without Dad, I said appropriately. Oh, so now you're going to act like I wasn't the one who raised you? You didn't raise me, I answered icily. You treated me like an accessory until Dad died and you needed me to clean up your mess. Lena, stay away from me, I warned in a chilly, low voice. If you ever try to steal from me again, I'll press charges. Her breath caught. You wouldn't. Try me. I ended the call. I blocked her number after that. It was months before I heard from her again. However, I followed her through other people. A few months later, an old neighbor of mine told me she was evicted from the flat. Moved in with a friend who, ironically, vanished as soon as the funds ran out. I wanted to feel sorry for her. However, I didn't. I had given her every opportunity. I had attempted to assist. I had made an effort to be concerned. She manipulated it, twisted it, and drained me dry each time. I was no longer in charge of her. I met Helen one day when I was in my second year of college. She was employed at the town's little bakery. For the first time in years, I returned her smile when she saw me. Lena, she remarked, using her apron to wipe her hands. How have you been? Good, was my honest response. College treating you well? Yeah, I'm making it work. Helen's grin grew softer. You always were strong. I remarked. I learned from the best. Helen grabbed my hand and squeezed it. She assured him, You're going to be okay. I know it. And I believed her for the first time in a long time. I created my own life. I got a career in corporate finance after graduating with honors. I put forth a lot of effort, worked my way up the ladder, and eventually purchased my own apartment, a stunning space with large windows that looked out over the city and high ceilings. After that, my mother made several attempts to get in touch. One of my birthday voicemails. A handwritten note that reads, I miss you. on a holiday card. However, I never responded because some folks are unable to return. I learned from her that love need to have conditions. However, I discovered that genuine love, the good kind, does not require payment. And now, at last, I was free. My mom continued to try. Oh no. You see, Elizabeth Parker's strength is her perseverance, particularly if she believes she has something left to take. I had established a stable existence for myself by the time I finished from college. I worked in corporate finance, had a downtown apartment, and had saved up enough cash for a comfortable night's sleep. I felt safe for the first time in my life, and my mother made the decision to return at that precise moment. It began with a text message. I'm in the city. Come on, let's have lunch. I choose to disregard it. 3 phone calls in one day followed. The number was blocked by me. When I returned home from work one evening, I noticed a familiar person sitting on the front steps of my apartment complex. Lena! I came to a complete halt. I said icily. What are you doing here? My mother brushed imaginary lint from her coat and got to her feet. She appeared to be just the same. Well-tailored clothing, a nice handbag, and flawless hair. It's funny because she was apparently broke when I last heard about her. Her words, I just wanted to see you. Why? Her smile wavered. Do I need a reason to visit my daughter? Yes. She pursed her lips. Lena, don't be like this. I crossed my arms and asked, like, what? Suspicious? Wary? After you tried to steal from me? She winced. That was a misunderstanding. No, I answered in a monotone voice. It was fraud. Her eyes blinked. Fine. I made a mistake. Multiple mistakes. When she said, but I'm trying now, her voice was quiet. I've changed. I arched an eyebrow. How exactly have you changed? I'm working now, she stated in a cheerful tone. At a boutique downtown. It nearly made me chuckle. A boutique? It's small, but I like it, she said in an unduly informal tone. And I've been going to therapy. Learning to manage things better. Manage what? Money, she said. Stress. I clenched my jaw. And why are you really here? Her eyes didn't quite meet her smile. Can't a mother want to reconnect with her daughter? After everything you pulled? Lena, what do you want? I interrupted her. Her mouth parted, then shut again. Her eyes strayed to one side, and I was aware. I asked, how much? Her gaze returned to mine. What? How much do you need? Lena, cut the act, Mom, I said. Just tell me how much you want so we can skip the bullshit. Her lips clenched. It's not like that. It's always like that. She sent out a sigh, as if I were being challenging. Fine, she replied. I'm a little behind on my credit card payments. How behind? She looked away. About 20,000. I gazed at her. 20,000? It's not that much in the grand scheme of things. Are you serious? I almost burst out laughing. Lena, I'm doing my best. I moved closer and said, oh, you're doing your best? Funny how your best always includes someone else's money. It's just temporary, she answered hastily. If you could help me get back on my feet, I retorted. You don't want to get back on your feet. You want a crutch, a lifeline. And you think I'm stupid enough to give it to you. Her gaze grew gloomy. I'm your mother, and I'm not your ATM, she curled her mouth. You're successful because of me. No, I answered icily. I'm successful in spite of you. Her mouth parted, then shut again. I said, goodbye, Mom, and turned to face the door. Lena, she said sharply. Don't walk away from me, I continued. Lena! I locked the door after slamming it behind me. Then she went off. Or I believed that she did. Because she was at my office the next thing I knew. The afternoon was a Thursday. The receptionist contacted me when I was studying financial papers at my desk. Lena, there's someone here to see you. Who? Elizabeth Parker? My stomach grew constricted. Send her away. She's very persistent. I'm sure she is. Should I call security? Give me 5 minutes. My mom was sitting on one of the elegant leather chairs in the foyer, with her purse neatly on her lap and her legs crossed. When she spotted me, she said, Lena, with brightness. What the hell are you doing here? She got up. I just wanted to talk. At my job? You weren't answering my calls. For a reason. She continued to smile. Can we go somewhere private? No. She pursed her lips. Lena, please. Why are you here? I told you. Cut the crap, Mom. She let out a sigh. Fine. I've hit a rough spot. Of course you have. I just need a loan. We're done here. She grabbed my wrist and said, Lena, wait. I jerked my head in her direction. Let go of me. She clenched her fingers. You don't understand. No, I answered icily. You don't understand. I released my hand and took a step back. You burned through Dad's company. You burned through the house. You even tried to steal from me. She twisted her face. I was desperate. I retorted. You were entitled. You still are. Lena, please. No, I responded in a hard, piercing voice. You don't get to ask for more after everything you've taken. But I'm your mother. Exactly, I replied. And you should have protected me. Instead, you used me. Her mouth parted, then shut again. Get out, I muttered. Anger flashed in her eyes. She growled, You're going to regret this. No, I replied. I'm at last free. She gazed into my eyes for a considerable amount of time. She turned and left after that. I also knew that she wouldn't be returning this time. I took a deep breath and leaned back at my desk. Even though my hands were shaking, I felt calm for the first time. It was done. She was no longer able to contact me. The cycle has finally been broken by me. And what do you know? It was incredibly satisfying. My mother vanished from my life after that day at work. And I mean all the way. No more phoning, no more text messages, no more making unexpected appearances outside my house or place of employment. Initially, I continued to wait for the other shoe to drop. I half expected her to try to guilt-trip me with some dramatic tale about reaching the bottom of the world, or to show up at my door intoxicated. However, nothing took place. Quiet. And, truthfully, more than anything else, that frightened me. Life continued as the months went by. At work, one received a promotion, relocated downtown to a better apartment, began dating a man named Daniel who was employed in the real estate industry. He was normal, steady, and hilarious. No complicated baggage, no dark holes in emotions. It was strange to be dating someone with no conditions. One evening, as we were sipping wine on my couch, Daniel remarked, You're so guarded. I answered, Can you blame me? No, he muttered. But you don't have to be. I gave a small smile. He was unable to comprehend. He was unable to. Because of individuals like Daniel, their families were stable. They were not taught how to sense the tension in a room, or how to tell when someone was about to blow up. However, I liked him. Furthermore, I liked the new version of myself that I was beginning to develop with him. Be calm, steady, in command. I was no longer that abandoned, afraid girl. I was creating my own life, a true life. Then my mom appeared once more. The morning was a Saturday. My phone buzzed when I was brewing coffee in my apartment. Blocked phone number. It was wrong of me to respond. However, I did. Lena? I felt sick to my stomach. Mom? She said. Hi, sweetheart, in an overly silky voice. How did you get this number? Oh, you know me. My hand gripped the phone more tightly. What do you want? Can't a mother check in on her daughter? We both know you didn't call to check in, she said, Lena, in a quiet, steady voice. I need your help. I shut my eyes. Naturally. What kind of help? I'm in a bit of a situation. Define situation. She let out a loud sigh. I made a bad investment. It nearly made me chuckle. Shocking. Lena, it's not that much. How much? 50,000. My coffee suffocated me. 50,000? It's not that much in the grand scheme of things. Mom, that's more than most people make in a year. Lena, please, she begged, increasing the intensity of her voice. I wouldn't be asking if I had other options. That's the problem, I stated in a chilly tone. You always make terrible decisions and expect other people to clean them up. It's different this time. Is it? It was yes, she demanded. I just need enough to pay off some debts. After that, I can rebuild. Rebuild? I said with a sour laugh. You've been beer building for a decade. Lena, adding, let me guess. If I say no, you're going to guilt trip me about being your daughter? Quiet. Or maybe you'll tell me Dad would have wanted me to help? More quiet. Yeah, I replied. That's what I thought. You have no idea how difficult it has been, she replied softly. My response was, Oh, I understand just fine. I lived through it. I'm the reason you're successful, she said abruptly. Because of the life I gave you. My voice grew sharper as I asked, The life you gave me? You mean the life I had to crawl out of? The therapy bills? The stress? The constant fear that I was going to end up like you? Lena, no, I said in a harsh tone. You don't get to take credit for my success. I got here in spite of you. She fell silent. I'm your mother, I remarked icily. And that used to mean something, but not anymore. Quiet. Lena, please. Lose my number. Wait. I ended the call. I blacklisted the number after that. I was also certain that I wouldn't hear from her again. That was our final conversation. After that, I heard tidbits about her. She wandered via many cities after leaving town. According to rumors, she began dating a man in the finance industry. When he discovered she had no money, he apparently broke up with her. I didn't feel guilty. But here's the thing. Some people are pure evil. Until nothing is left, they continue to take. What about my mom? A pit, she was. At last, I had figured out how to quit chasing after her. I received a letter in the mail 2 years later, from a legal office. Without thinking, I opened it, and my heart stopped as I saw the words estate settlement. It came from my mom's attorney. She was no longer alive. Heart failure. She had also left me everything. This turned out to be quite little. A modest life insurance coverage, a piece of jewelry, and vintage photo box. That evening, when I sat on my couch with the letter on the table in front of me, I felt nothing. Not melancholy, not comfort, nothing except emptiness. I considered discarding the picture box. Instead, though, I opened it. My mother was holding me as a baby in the first photo. She was a young woman with a protective embrace around me and a smile on her face, and I had a new perspective on her for a second. Not as the cunning woman who drained me of all my energy. However, as someone who, perhaps had once given it her all, nothing changed as a result. However, it made letting go simpler. I packed the package and delivered it to a charity center that weekend. The picture of her cradling me as a baby was the only one I preserved. I never looked at it again after putting it in a drawer. Some people strive to avoid the harm their parents did for the rest of their life. I refused to be one of them. I created my own life. An actual one. Steady work. Companions. Eventually, Daniel and I shared a residence. Even a dog, Max, a lethargic golden retriever, joined our family. I was no longer defined by my mother. That chapter was finally closed. And now, I had freedom.